What's going on? That's Textbook Sports Squad. Everybody out there listening, right now you are listening to the That's Textbook Sports podcast. I appreciate every one of y'all, my followers, subscribers who have subscribed to this podcast. Once again, the link to my social media is going to be all in the description, so make sure you go check that out. Yesterday, we had a sports equinox, 11 NBA games, 9 NHL games, 2 MLS playoff soccer games, Monday Night Football, Game 3 of the World Series. I'm going to be talking about all of that, everything that's gone down this past weekend, what went down last night with the Las Vegas Raiders, and their offense, once again, still hasn't put up 20 points, even though they have Davante Adams. He was only just held to 1 reception, 7 targets. Is he asking for a trade? What's going on with the Las Vegas Raiders? What needs to be fixed? When or does Josh McDaniels need to be fired? Going to be talking about a lot. It's going to be a long episode. Appreciate y'all. Once again, like this podcast, subscribe, follow me on my social media. The link will be in the description. And as y'all know, that's Textbook. So I'm going to start off with last night. Las Vegas Raiders, once again, don't put up 20 points. They haven't put up 20 points in a game all season. They have Davante Adams. They have Josh Jacobs. Josh McDaniels was formerly an offensive coordinator. You would think he's an offensive mind and could find ways to utilize Davante Adams, and that this would be a team that at least one time this season would put up 20 points or more. They haven't. Josh McDaniels this year has made some questionable calls when it comes down to going for it. This Raiders football team is just a mess. Defensively, they're really stout. The reason why they've won 3 football games so far is all because of their defense. Max Crosby, absolutely a stud. I mean, if we're talking about if he's on a different football team, like if he's on the Philadelphia Eagles, San Francisco 49ers, a team that's usually winning all the time in the playoffs consistently, we're talking about this guy maybe being the best defensive player in the world with everything that he does. He's so versatile. And the thing that's really shocking to me is as a defensive end, typically you don't expect a defensive end to have all-class speed. He does that. So if he's facing a running quarterback who's using the option, always going outside the pocket, he can still chase them down. He's a stud. No, nothing more needs to be said about him. Their defense, the Las Vegas Raiders, stout. A really good defense. Not one of those top-flight defenses in the league, but a defense that is going to keep their team in the game at least, given that the offense really is nothing at this point. So what's wrong with the offense? What's wrong with the Las Vegas Raiders? A lot of players have been saying they don't know. And you know what? That's exactly the same thing. I don't know what's wrong with this offense. But I think one of the biggest things that's wrong with them is their offensive line, and they can't pass protect for more than a second and a half. Every single time Jimmy Garoppolo is facing constant pressure, having to deal with the rusher in his face from the guards, the tackles, the center spot, everywhere defensive line, opposing defenses are getting to them. You can see it, and he's also just not giving him what the defense is giving him. There's a couple times where he's had the check down. He decides to go to Davante Adams. It's an interception. Missing throws to Davante Adams, especially that long one where Davante is going on a go route down the left sideline. And then Josh Jacobs struggles to get going. I don't know why they're not giving him as many carries. Of course, as I mentioned, a big caveat of him possibly not getting going is that offensive line struggles. But this team is just a mess. I expect Josh McDaniels to be fired. I don't know. I mean, they could say it's something where they fire him during the season. Maybe that happens in 3 or 4 weeks, or with only 2 weeks left to go. maybe they trade Devontae Adams. The trade deadline is tonight. Spooky season, October 31st. Happy Halloween to all y'all. Trade deadline today, 4 o'clock Eastern. We'll see what happens. But if they were to trade Devontae Adams, that's a really sticky situation just because he signed that contract extension. It's a lot of dead cap. Who's willing to bring on the contract with Devontae Adams? We all know he's a superstar, elite, top 3, top 2, maybe not even top 2, just number 1 wide receiver. But if they do move him, that's something I expect to happen after the season. Whether they decide to trade him, let him go. Now, going on to the Detroit Lions. This is a football team, as I've said before, they don't wow you, and when you compare them to a lot of the other teams, it's not anything that puts behinds in seats or makes you want to get your popcorn. It's not a lot of cool stuff that's entertaining and fashion. They're just a football team that executes way better than the opposing team. They use motion somewhat, but they're just a football team that utilizes the run game. They know who they are. They run the football a lot. They have play action. They use ARSB on a lot of option routes, especially in the slot where he's so dynamic. They use that play action for Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs. 198 total yards, a rushing touchdown, and he got going early in this game. First 7 touches, all went to him. He's finally found a rhythm. Fantasy managers of Jahmyr Gibbs can rejoice. They've got something to look at. He's putting up major points, and you knew it was going to happen at some point. But with the David Montgomery injury, it was a lot more carries for Gibbs, and with just about anything, when you get more practice and you get more reps at it, you're going to get better, you're going to get comfortable, you're going to gel. That's what happens with a lot of rookies. They come into the league first 5 to 8 weeks, really, they don't get going. But after that, that's when they start to get going. They find a rhythm, they start to gel in the offense, understand how they're going to be used and what they can bring with their skill set. Electric runner. It's going to be interesting how they're going to use both of them, because once David Montgomery gets back, sounds like, and it most definitely looks like, it's going to be a committee. So both these guys, usually they were getting 20 carries or 20 touches. Now it's going to be reduced to about 5, maybe 4. How do they gel once David Montgomery gets back? But the Detroit Lions, and looking at the schedule that they have in the next 4 games, there's only one team that has a 500 record. This is a team, with their schedule and how they've played so far, that has the possibility to be maybe the number 1 seed in the NFC. When you look at a lot of their other peers in the NFC have some tough schedules ahead of them. Lions, next 4 games, only one opponent that has a 500 winning record. So it could get interesting. So Ford Field most definitely is going to have themselves hosting the playoff game. But can the road to the Super Bowl go through them? Let me know in the comment section, my followers, everyone listening to this podcast, what y'all think. Now, speaking a little bit about the World Series, Texas Rangers, they're 2-1 in this series. It feels like all the playoffs, like this whole MLB postseason combined, has been about the road team and being road warriors. And that's what the Texas Rangers have done the best. 9-0 on the road this postseason. I think, if I'm wrong, please tell me I'm wrong, but I think this is a team that hasn't lost a road playoff game this postseason. 9-0 right now. They win 3-1 last night against the Arizona Diamondbacks. Corey Seager, player of that game, obviously hit the 2-run home run into right field. That gave them the big boost. They got a couple innings from Scherzer. Now, they didn't really expend a whole lot of their bullpen, so now in Game 4, they have plenty of options for their bullpen, so they're feeling really good about themselves. The biggest thing in this series, and of course the most entertaining game in this series, was Game 1. They're down. Adolis Garcia hits that walk-off home run. They win. That was, if we're going to look at this series and say what specific game that was in balance, kind of on the edge, to tilt this series a different direction, we're going to be looking at Game 1 in that home run shot by Adolis Garcia. Be interesting to see how this series goes moving forward. Rangers, Road Warriors, can they take Game 4 and establish full control in this series? We'll see. And then for the NBA, 11 NBA games going on. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, Steph Curry, all these other guys putting up 30-plus points so far. And then we have the in-season tournament starts, I believe they said November 3rd, so that's in a couple of days. That'll be fun to watch. But I want to get to Luka Doncic. Because Luka, if the Mavericks were a better team, and if they had someone alongside him that can help him. I know they have Kyrie Irving, but I'm talking about Luka Doncic in his career as a Dallas Mav as a whole. Like, if he had someone and maybe a couple other guys that can role play, do their role really efficiently, we would be talking about Luka Doncic as being probably the best player in the world. He's clutch. We've seen what he's done against the Clippers and in the postseason when he's got there. 40-point games, 40-point triple-doubles. He's been setting records when it comes to recording triple-doubles in the regular season. Absolute scoring machine. A 3-level scorer, can score near the basket, can score in the paint, 2-point range, 3-point range as well. Also extended his 3-point range. A phenomenal passer. Even if you have the best trap defense on him and it's a double team, he'll still find that guy way out in the corner for an open 3 or an open shot. He's just that good as a scorer, a great playmaker. And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had a rough night one game, but still doing his thing. As I mentioned, he's got such a relaxed, nonchalant scorer, such a nonchalant game, but it's so effective. You see how easy he's just able to get to his spot, get a bucket. Really phenomenal play from him so far. We'll see if he can keep it up. And if the OKC Thunder can get themselves into the playoffs, we know they have really young talent around SGA, Josh Giddey, Chet Holmgren, all these guys. And then OKC, they do a phenomenal job at acquiring first-round pick after first-round pick after first-round pick. Their potential or their timeline to be a championship caliber team, I believe, is in 2026. I believe that's when a lot of those young guys gonna start getting into their prime years. You'll see a lot of the top teams right now, like the Stephs, the LeBrons, the Kevin Durants. They'll slowly decline at some time, you would think, by 2026. So that's when OKC can really take over and have their time in the NBA. And lastly, when it comes to the NBA, well, not lastly, I'll have a couple more topics, but I really wanted to talk about how the Golden State Warriors bench has looked so far. When Golden State traded Jordan Poole for Chris Paul in the offseason, in the summer, a lot of people didn't like this trade. They denounced it. Why are you trading for Chris Paul when you're a fast-paced team? Why are you trading Jordan Poole, who's shown he's a really good scorer, for Chris Paul? How is this going to fit in the offense? Golden State is so fast-paced. I don't understand if it's going to fit. How are they going to integrate him into the starting lineup? How is CPT's mainly ball dominant? This is a team that likes to use screens, use a lot of constant motion. I like this trade for the one caveat, and that is with the Golden State Warriors last year, and especially in the playoffs, you saw that with the Jordan Poole minutes, although he's a really good scorer, he's a fantastic scorer. Right now in Washington, can get 25 easy. But there's a lot more in basketball than scoring. You gotta have IQ, defense, rebounding, passing, etc. Those are just things that Jordan Poole couldn't bring to the Golden State Warriors, but they actually needed. They already had guys that can score. They needed someone who can stabilize the bench, stabilize the second unit in the non-Curry minutes, and that's what the Chris Paul trade has done right now. Throughout these 4 games, Golden State Warriors have, when Steph Curry is on the bench, the second unit still goes a level up. They could be down 3 when Steph goes out, and then now somehow they're up 3 or 5. And I think we're seeing it on full display. Chris Paul managing that second unit. IQ on the team is better. They're getting a lot of good possessions and quality buckets, which is what CP3 obviously brings, and Jordan really couldn't bring. He was chucking up a lot of threes from just about half court. A lot of fancy dribbles, a lot of highlight plays that you see on social media, which is cool if you're doing it right and not turning the ball over, but then it's not so cool when you're doing the opposite. And then the rookies, Brandon Podjemski, Trace Jackson Davis, providing them that big man that Golden State Warriors fans have been looking for years, someone who can just rebound, protect the rim, get a couple lobs. That's what he's doing. We got to watch out for the Golden State Warriors. Yes, they may have Chris Paul. His legs may be tired by the time postseason comes. But with the nucleus of this team and the DNA that they have right now, I don't think they're a team we can overlook. It's going to be a gauntlet of the West. The West is going to be an absolute gauntlet. But I think we have to watch out for these Golden State Warriors making more noise than possible. And listen, in the West, it's Denver, and even in the NBA, it's Denver, and then you got Boston there. I'll give Boston credit because of their lineup and their starting 5 and their bench. But when we're talking about levels to it, Denver, then you have Boston, and then you see everyone else kind of funnel into there. Really interesting to see how the NBA plays out rest of season. Now going on to the NFL, we had a pretty wild week, and it was somewhat kind of boring. I mean, it wasn't a week that really entertained you. Maybe there's a couple games that were entertaining. Specific one, New York Jets, New York Giants. 10-7, the New York Jets somehow won with a minute 17 or a minute and a half, I think it was. ESPN, their projector of during the game who has the most likely chance of winning the game, when the Giants had the ball with a minute and change left, they had a 99.9% of winning that football game. How they messed it up or how it got messed up, I don't know how. But like I said, With this New York Jets football team, yes, they don't have Aaron Rodgers. And yes, they have Zach Wilson at quarterback. But any team that plays them, it doesn't matter if they're the best team in the league, the worst team in the league, whoever it is, this New York Jets football team is a coin flip. That defense is always going to keep them into games. Somehow, some way, against the most prolific offense in the NFL, their defense will keep them into games. Yeah, the offense will probably score anywhere from 10 to 16 points, but that defense keeps them in the games, and they provide upsets like we saw there. Who knows how far this Jets team goes? I think they go, with the pace that they're on right now, they probably win anywhere from 7 to 9 games, and who knows if that gets them into the playoffs or not. And the AFC North, leveling up. Now, Pittsburgh, they're a mess, obviously, but everyone else in the AFC North, including the Cincinnati Bengals, who are starting to heat up right now. Whenever we talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, we shouldn't judge this team on their first 4 weeks. Of course, we shouldn't judge any team on their first 4 weeks. But for the Cincinnati Bengals, it's like the first 4 weeks is preseason to them. They start to get to know their identity. They start to gel. They start to find out who they are as a football team or who they want to be. And then after that, once October and it starts to get cold out, they go on this 5-7 game win streak. Now they're in the playoffs, have a chance maybe at the number 1 seed sometimes. But when Joe Burrow is upright and when he's healthy, and their defense and Lou Anarumo, who I believe should be a head coach after this year, when all of that starts to get going, they are a team to beat in a Super Bowl caliber team. Jamar Chase, he's doing his thing. And eventually at some point in time, T. Higgins is going to get involved into this offense. And once he does, it's just going to make them even more scarier. Joe Mixon, and if the Bengals can establish a run and keep themselves ahead of the chains, and like I said, that offensive line can protect Burrow, I think they're a team to beat in the AFC. Now, they are last in the division. They're tied with a lot of other teams in that division. But, of course, we have to watch out for them just because we've seen what they've done in the past. Baltimore Ravens, looking really good. Beat the Arizona Cardinals. It was a close game at first. A lot closer than a lot of Ravens fans would expect. But they did take control. Arizona did get a couple of garbage time stats, garbage time scores in there, which made it interesting at the end. But with this Baltimore Ravens team, the one caution I have for them is they added all these guys to help Lamar, but I still don't think it's enough. Like, you added Odell, but yes, he is getting older, and he hasn't had a touchdown reception all year. He's been really limited, but you expect that with the age that he's at right now, and of course, he's gone through a couple of injuries, so he's not going to be the same like he used to be. And then I don't know who else can help him outside of Mark Andrews. Like, I believe if they were to, today, at some point in time, before 4 p.m. Eastern Time, get a Derrick Henry, and it's being reported that they are looking at getting Josh Jacobs. If they get either one of those two, I think that takes them another level. And I like it for this football team just because you have Lamar. Defenses have to pay attention to him outside the pocket and on the boundary. Then if you add Josh Jacobs with that Baltimore Ravens offensive line, it makes them that much more dangerous. But I still think they need another wide receiver to help Lamar out. It's what takes this team from being they can beat anybody but also be beaten by anybody to a powerhouse in the AFC. And especially, too, if they were to add another corner, listen, their defense, it's a Baltimore Ravens football team. When are they going to have a bad defense? Secondary, if they could add another corner by the trade deadline, then I'd really like that for them. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are really just they're a team that you don't know how at the end of the season they're above 500, but somehow they are. It's the Mike Tomlin way. Any team that he has, no matter the roster, it feels like he'll take them to be 500 or above at the end of the season. But with Pickett being out and rolling with Mitch Trubisky and their offense being almost either near last or last in just about every offensive category is alarming for this football team. We don't know the extent to Kenny Pickett's injury. Trubisky finished the game. And then lastly in that division, Cleveland Browns with Greg Newsome, Denzel Ward, and Martin Emerson. That's an elite cornerback trio that they have. And then, of course, Myles Garrett, that defensive line, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. They're gonna get things going. The Cleveland Browns are still a quarterback away from competing once again. In a really close game with the Seattle Seahawks, first in the NFC West. Like I mentioned for the Browns, they're just a quarterback away. They have the offensive line. They have Amari Cooper, although you feel like at sometimes he goes quiet for some games. So maybe they need someone else outside of Amari Cooper. Maybe they need some more playmakers on that offense. Obviously, the loss of Nick Chubb hurts them. You still have Kareem Hunt. But that defense, the technique that the corners have is flawless. Defensive line always establishes leverage. So that's why they're able to win a lot of their one-on-one battles and matchups with the offensive line. Because when you're playing any line position, defense or offensive, if you're the one that you're putting your hands first on the guy and establishing leverage, you're going to win 90% of the time. That's what the Cleveland Browns do. Corners, they never open the gate. And what I mean by they don't open the gate is when you're playing cornerback, you're always taught that you have to keep your hips, shoulders square. And if you open your hips to the left or right, you open your gate, the receiver sees that, they're going to take advantage of it, they're going to get open. But these guys always staying square, always trusting and being confident in their technique. That's what makes them one of the best defenses in the NFL. Really interesting AFC North. A lot of teams have a similar record in there. In the end, as I projected in the preseason, I think the Bengals take over this division. But it's going to be fun to watch those Bengals-Ravens matchups later in the year and that sort of stuff. Now, still talking about the AFC, Kansas City Chiefs, their record of consecutive wins against the Denver Broncos is snapped. And you felt like it was just going to happen at some point in time. You knew, even though they had Patrick Mahomes, this record was going to be snapped. It was Sunday. You got to give credit to the Denver Broncos. They played their style of football. They're actually finding an identity on offense, which is running the ball, using play action, limiting rush throw attempts. Their defense, and as I tweeted during the game, Baron Browning is a difference maker for this football team. He's someone that they can use at linebacker, they can use at edge rusher, and because he's played linebacker and edge, you understand that he has the speed and physical capability to be kind of Micah Parsons-ish, and that's get around the edge, be able to dip, make it really difficult for opposing linemen, tackles, to put their hands on him, round the edges, and sack the quarterback. That's what he's done. He had 2 sacks in that game, and I believe he did have a strip sack. Patrick Mahomes just wasn't himself, and I'm getting concerned about this Kansas City Chiefs offense. Listen, Kelsey, he's been off and on. You can tell me about the Taylor Swift stat. I don't believe it. I think that's a really a joke of a stat. With this Chiefs offense, they just don't have anyone else. And you saw it late in the game. Sky Moore is wide open for a touchdown. Even though it's a 21-6 game and Denver's had complete control in this football game, there was still that possibility where Kansas City scores a touchdown here, and now they make it a one-possession game with the potential to tie it and head into OT. Sky Moore drops the football wide open against Patrick Surtain. That's been the theme for the Kansas City Chiefs this year. Game 1 in their loss to the Detroit Lions. Other receivers, Kadarius Toney especially, can't catch the football. Now they had Kelsey out that game. This game, their second loss of the season. No one can establish themselves as the wide receiver 1 outside of Travis Kelsey. Guys are dropping the football. Like eventually, defenses are going to figure out that it's always Mahomes and Kelsey. Now Kelsey probably doesn't run a route within the play. He probably just freestyles out there a lot of the times. But eventually defenses are going to find out ways to stop him. So who else is going to step up? This was my concern with the Chiefs last year. But then again, they did have Juju out there. And they had other guys that could complement themselves within this offense. But I'm growing concerned, especially when you consider that there's other teams, not only in the AFC, but in the NFL, that can pass the football really well, put up lots of points, and the Chiefs defense, they've played really well all year. George Karlaftis, the second-year guy, is making a name for himself. But once again, as I said, I'm growing really concerned with how their offense is going to operate when Kelsey is either shut down by the defense or he's having a bad game. Who else do they go to? So it'll be interesting to see what kind of moves they make at the trade deadline. DeAndre Hopkins just had a really good football game. Do they decide to move for him? I don't know. I would suggest they find someone. But it's getting really cautious and scary for the Chiefs. And then on the side of playmakers, but the Green Bay Packers offense, they've only won 2 games this year. Record-wise considered, they're a bad football team. A lot of people believe your record says what you are, but I don't think that's the case with this Packers offense. I just think, not the Packers offense, with this Packers team. Their defense is really good. They've drafted a lot of really nice pieces defensively. They just haven't played really well this year. And then offensively, they don't have anyone else to step up. Listen, Jordan Love, I'm not taking any blame away from Jordan Love. Jordan Love has played really bad football so far. He needs to get a fair share of the blame as well. But there's also guys dropping the football. Guys that should be able to leap over the defender, catch the ball. As in, it wasn't a bad ball by any means, but it was catchable. Instead, defender snags it. It's an interception, going the other way. When you watch the Packers games this year, everyone's dropping the ball. Or maybe someone's not getting open. So what's wrong with the Packers offense team? In my opinion, you knew you were going to make the transition from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, so you had to temper your expectations. Obviously, we're seeing that they're only a team with 2 wins so far in this season. It hasn't gone well. And then again, this is a Packers organization that has went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and they haven't spent a first-round pick on a wide receiver. And they haven't spent high value on a wide receiver. You can say, well, they drafted Christian Washington in the 2nd round. Okay, that's great, but has he been developed yet? Because you also did draft Devontae Adams. He wasn't a first round pick, but you also were able to develop him as well. Speaking on what type of value they spent at playmaker, you see it start to rear its head right now. Traditionally, they've had the mindset of, oh, well, we have a Hall of Fame quarterback. We're just going to let that Hall of Fame quarterback figure it out. Either he figures it out or we develop the guy. When you're doing that with someone you don't know if they are or aren't a Hall of Fame quarterback, that gets the product that you see right now. So traditionally, you're an organization that says, we develop Hall of Fame quarterbacks, we develop some really solid wide receivers. We're just going to let that play out and let it eventually show. Well, it hasn't gone the way you expected, and now you are in the situation that you're in now. And another thing with the Green Bay Packers is you have Aaron Jones. He's probably your best player on that offense. Maybe he's your best player on the football team in its entirety. You still aren't getting him the ball. You still aren't utilizing him. And yeah, I understand. You have offensive line issues all over the place. You have pass protection issues all over the place. But you still got to find ways to use Aaron Jones. You found creative ways to use Devontae when he was there. You got to do that with Aaron Jones, who's probably your best wide receiver, your best receiving option, and maybe your best player on the football team. Got to get him more involved. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles have a big matchup coming up with their NFC East rival. What I've seen so far from the Philadelphia Eagles, they're a team that it hasn't looked pretty compared to last year. Now, maybe the expectation for this year as opposed to last year was a lot way higher. But offensively, this is a team, especially the past couple of weeks, against the Dolphins, now against the Commanders, that the offensive line hasn't played up to their standards. They're letting pressure get to Jalen Hurts. Sometimes it's 2-3 guys within Hurts' vicinity. The running game just, for some reason, isn't getting established as good as it was last year. For offensively, for this team, it feels to me like they're a team that relies on A.J. Brown, and then sometimes they have the tush push in there. Their head coach, Nick Sirianni, said that with that, we're so confident in that tush push play that when it's first down, we feel like it's 1st and 9, just because if it's 4th and 1, we have a really great chance, a 99% chance of making that play and gaining that yardage. Like I said, offensively, lean on A.J. Brown. And I don't blame him. He has played phenomenal out there. He nicknames himself Batman. He's been just about that Batman and more for this football team. Phenomenal one-handed catch by the sideline, putting up yards after yards, touchdown after touchdown. But the thing that concerns me is there's so much more than A.J. Brown, although he is an elite weapon. You have Dallas Goedert. Swift has been playing well in Philadelphia. You have Devontae Smith as well. How are we not finding ways to utilize those guys more? Maybe that's because the playbook hasn't opened up. They're a football team that knows they're going to be competing for a Super Bowl. They're going to be competing late in the season. So that's when they'll start to open things up. Like I said, they're much more of a football team than just one player. And then you look at their defense. I've got some really growing concerns with their defense, especially in the secondary. Maybe this was just not a good game for the defense in general. Maybe I'm just overreacting a little bit. But even on paper, Who else outside of Darius Slay? Darius Slay has had some really great moments this year. Then he's had some times where he breaks down in coverage. Who else are they going to find? I know they traded for Kevin Byard, the safety from the Titans, an All-Pro. But in the secondary, these new guys have to really understand their coverage, can't have any breakdowns, or they're going to have to find someone else who can contribute in that secondary. Because that could be a position that very well hurts them in the playoffs and hurts their ability to achieve their Super Bowl dreams. Because that's what it was last year with them. They were really good. Yeah, their defensive line was getting to the quarterback in about a second and a half, really quickly. But their secondary, when that defensive line was limited, couldn't step up. We saw it with the holding call now, whether it was a holding or pass interference against Juju Smith-Schuster. Still, at the end of the day, you lost the football game. So their secondary concerns me. Defensively, on that defensive line, still really good. I mean, Hassan Reddick has had some really clutch sacks. But if they're going to look to make themselves or separate themselves from the rest of the pack, they're the only team with one loss in the NFL. If they look to separate themselves from the rest of the pack, they're going to have to add someone else on that secondary. Maybe that's Jalen Johnson. Maybe that's someone else out there. Jalen Johnson, as of this morning, has requested a trade. We'll see how that goes. And then, for another team that's had a really bad week, what's going wrong with this football team that I'm going to talk about next? And that is the San Francisco 49ers. What's wrong with this football team? The first 5 weeks, they looked like world beaters. Now, maybe after beating Dallas the way they did, they came out too confident and overconfident. That's what you might think. I don't think that, because you were in a close game against the Cleveland Browns. We know that the Cleveland Browns have a phenomenal defense and that they're a quarterback away from really competing and making some noise. Brock Purdy drives them all the way down. This is without Christian McCaffrey. Deebo Samuel drives them down the field. Their kicker misses the kick. Okay, so then the next week against the Minnesota Vikings, they can't get things going. Struggle offensively, particularly you struggle defensively, and in that secondary, without Justin Jefferson, this team is able to move the football on you. Your pass rush and Bosa's aren't getting home for some reason. Now, maybe for Nick Bosa, that's because he sat out during training camp and all that stuff until he got a new deal. Now he's just working back to form. But there's still no excuses for your secondary to have the type of performance that they've had against Minnesota and against Cincinnati. Now, I can see it with Cincinnati because they have all these guys, Chase, Boyd, Higgins, but against Minnesota with no Justin Jefferson. And listen, Jordan Addison is no slouch. He's looking like the best wide receiver in that draft class. And at the time, this was before this week or this past week, Jordan Addison was second in receiving touchdowns. The only person that was ahead of him was none other than Tyreek Hill. Brock Purdy throws a couple interceptions that game. Okay, he's not going to have it this game. Next game, against the Cincinnati Bengals, another 3 interceptions. And I believe that they said either it was Romo or Nance on the broadcast during that game that is his 5th interception in the last 3 games when he threw it to Pratt. This is... I don't know where to start with this football team other than maybe they got too overconfident against their win against Dallas, or maybe this is a football team that maybe other teams have found out about Brock Purdy. Maybe he isn't who we thought he was, although I think when it comes to the small and nuanced details as it pertains to playing quarterback, he's really efficient. and a really good quarterback at that. Still cannot be turning the ball over. Now listen, I know with a lot of these football teams, I said, but they have pass protection issues, they have secondary issues. And I hate to keep harping on it, but that's a majority and a big percent of football. With the NFL moving to a pass happy league, you got to have a secondary that can hold up. With football in general, I've never seen a football team, maybe outside the Cincinnati Bengals, that has had little pass protection and still been able to achieve Super Bowl dreams, achieve a lot of great things in the NFL. 49ers don't have Trent Williams. That's obviously a huge blow because they're getting a large percentage of Brock Purdy's pressures are coming from the left side. You also have pass protection issues on the right side, just about everywhere for the 49ers. And with a quarterback that's the size of Brock Purdy, we all know he's not a very tall football player. You have to protect this guy. And they have to get back to their identity, in my opinion. When Debo was there, they were a run-heavy football team. And listen, I've harped on Shanahan saying that he uses a lot of his key guys a lot. They go through a lot of big hits. You don't want that, especially if you're a football team that has huge aspirations of winning the Super Bowl. You don't want to overutilize these guys. I understand him for not overutilizing these guys because they haven't gone back to what works before, which is they're a run football team that utilizes play action. They're not a football team that just drops back 30 to 40 times, has Brock Purdy be that guy. He's shown he can have moments of it, especially in the Browns game when he drove him down the field, but it's still just not their identity. And like I said with the Eagles, I'm going to say the same thing for the 49ers. They need secondary help. What type of moves are they going to make at the deadline? But main things for the 49ers, get back to playing your brand of football. Get healthy. You've got the bye week coming up. That's great. Hopefully you can get Trent and Debo back. And fix up your defense secondary-wise. And listen, this is my last point on the San Francisco 49ers. This is a Shanahan football team, especially in October and especially late October. For some reason, they always struggle. They struggle to get things going. They struggle. Maybe they have a 500 or a losing record in the month of October. But then after that, this is when his teams really start to elevate themselves and become those teams that you got to watch out for. We saw in 2021 when they had their historic run. They beat the Rams last week of the regular season, went on a run to go face up the Rams, and are an interception away from going to the Super Bowl. Now, to talk about college football, there wasn't a whole lot of teams or big matchups playing this week. A lot of teams were on idle. But you had a huge upset. The Kansas Jayhawks, their first win versus a ranked opponent since, I believe, 1984. Jayhawks fans, Jayhawks faithful, student section, once they won that football game, took the goalposts, took them to the lake. Got to give all credit to the Kansas Jayhawks. With their backup quarterback, they were able to beat a top 10 team and a team others thought had a chance of going to the college football playoff. For the Oklahoma Sooners, they just overlooked the Kansas Jayhawks. You saw them when they came out really sluggish, threw a pick six on their first drive. They thought this is a team that, Jayhawks team, they usually don't make a whole lot of noise in football. That's a basketball school. Their backup quarterback is going to be playing. Yeah, we should just be able to walk into this game, control it, be up by double digits, win this football game, take on the flight to Oklahoma. That wasn't the case, and there was a huge delay. I don't know if it was a rain delay, a lightning delay. There was a huge delay, lasted about an hour, and then Oklahoma started to It's kind of like they got the message that, hey, we're playing. This is football. Any team we play has a chance to beat us. The game, we don't start out in the game with a 10-point or a double-digit lead. They scored a touchdown, and then they just kind of went back. This is a defense that was confused. I don't know. Brent Venables is a defensive-minded guy. How is his defense able to get confused against a team who's starting their backup quarterback, and the backup quarterback really wasn't passing the ball all that great. He made some plays, but there were also plays that Oklahoma should have made. Their defense got confused, overlooked their opponent, lose to the Kansas Jayhawks. And listen, the Kansas Jayhawks are no slouch. What their head coach has done over there is really impressive. This is a team, only 2 losses on the season. When have we said that the Kansas Jayhawks are a team that's only, especially football, that's only had 2 losses on the season? Gotta give them all the credit, all the props to them. Oregon goes into Utah. Utah, this is the team that beat USC. Utah just didn't have it. Oregon clearly was the better football team. It speaks volumes to the state of the program and the state of a football team that USC has right now. The fact that Oregon is able to go into Utah, dominate them. Utah was able to go into USC, Southern California, and beat them. Oregon, college football playoff rankings, their initial ones come out tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Oregon, in my opinion, yes, I'm going to have them in the Final Four. They're a good football team, y'all. Dan Lanning has brought the Oregon football team back. They're not just the Chip Kelly days anymore in that era with Marcus Mariota and Chip Kelly. They're back. Bo Nix playing at a high level, but here's the thing with Bo Nix is that in his first years with Auburn, he really wasn't showing what he's done now. He was a guy that we thought, oh, he has no chance to go into the NFL draft. You saw how the way he played at Auburn, his Auburn stats, but now all of a sudden he goes to Oregon and he's got a different flow to him. He's playing with timing. He's playing with anticipation. He's throwing some guys open. Maybe this is just Oregon has a lot better in place to help Bo Nix. And Dan Lanning, who is a defensive-minded guy, has found some way to get him developed. What was Gus Malzahn doing? What did he not see? Maybe it's just a simplified playbook for Bo Nix. I'm not going to call him a top quarterback or a quarterback that's up there with all these other NFL eligible guys, because I seen what he was at Auburn, and it's like there can't be this big of a transformation made. Maybe I'm wrong about that. If I am, I will full up on this podcast admit it. Nonetheless, though, Oregon, a team we have to watch out for. Defense, they all over the ball, not even just defensively. They just play fast. They're physical. Bucky Irving playing really phenomenal ball right now. Gonna be an NFL guy, definitely, for sure. No one can get a clean hit on him, and he has amazing contact balance. Running backs, especially in the NFL, are taught that the first guy better not bring you down. Well, for Bucky Irving, he does more than that. Sometimes the third or fourth guy doesn't bring him down. And he's not only just a physical runner that has the capability to go 0 to 60. He is also a receiving threat. So you can use him on the Texas route, and that's what Oregon does a lot. What the Texas route is, for those of you who don't know, you have the running back lined up in the backfield. He goes like he's running a flat route across the line of scrimmage, but then he fakes that and then cuts upfield. They're really efficient at running that. Gotta watch out for Oregon football. And then while on the subject of the Pac-12, Washington is in a close game once again. They're in a close game with Stanford. Washington is a team that beat Oregon. So you have all that confusion in the Pac-12. We thought Washington was a top 4 football team and a team that we expected to make a lot of noise as pertains to the college football playoff and getting a bid. Now they're a team that's had 2 bad games against lesser opponents in Arizona State and Stanford. But the thing that we do know in the Pac-12 is USC struggles defensively. I'm going to keep harping on it. They struggled defensively. Alex Grinch, I'm going to keep harping on this football team for Alex Grinch because he has all these guys right here, but somehow, some way, it's not working. Why is it not working? I don't understand. I don't know. Caleb Williams didn't have the best day, although he threw for a couple of touchdowns, but to escape in a 50-49 game, I believe it was, against California. Guys, I don't know if this is a football team we should even have ranked in the top 20. Now, maybe saying top 20 I was being generous. Just with the state of their defense and how Caleb Williams is playing late in the season. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the initial college football playoff rankings go down tonight. There's always something interesting that happens, and it ruffles a lot of people's feathers. You can say it's SEC bias or whatnot. How I expect it to go ranked, I believe the committee is going to keep Georgia at 1. This is my projection, of the committee's rankings, not my own. I believe the committee is going to go Georgia 1, Michigan 2, probably going to have Ohio State at 3, and then they'll go with someone like Florida State. You may even see Alabama at either 5 or 6. That's just how that's just how I think the committee works, how their brain is wired. Alabama, you have to remember, only has 1 loss on the season. Their committee likes to rank based on what teams have also done in their tenure and in the past. So we know even though Alabama has 1 loss, of course, that's against Texas. They're going to move Alabama up to 5 or 6. Somewhere near there, you got to expect it. My initial rankings, I mean, if we're talking resume, I'm going to go with Ohio State 1 just because they've beaten Notre Dame. They've had a lot of ranked wins. I'm going to keep Georgia at 1. Then I'll probably move Ohio State to 2 with Michigan 3. And I've got to go. I know I said I had Oregon in the top 4, but I don't know if I can move Oregon ahead of Florida State. I mean, even though Florida State is playing in ACC, Florida State should absolutely win that conference. Their only fight in the ACC, you're thinking about Clemson. Then they played Duke, but Duke's also had not been playing well as of late. I'm going to keep Florida State 4 and then have Oregon right there at 5, but it's really close. But I got to give the edge to Florida State. Haven't lost any games. You've also beaten LSU, too. LSU is catching on as of late. We're going to have LSU, Alabama, primetime. That'll be fun to watch. Those are my initial college football playoff rankings. Let me know in the comments section what your playoff rankings are down below. Once again, follow me on social media. The links to my social media will be in the description. Make sure you go check that out. Hit the follow button. Hit that subscribe and like button. Share this podcast. Be a friend. Tell a friend. It's Halloween, y'all. Take care. Be safe. Have a fantastic day. Eat a lot of candy. I know I sure will. Also, let me know in the comment section, what is your favorite candy? What's your go-to Halloween candy? What's your go-to Halloween movie? I know for mine, I like the original Halloween. And then for the candy, It either has to be Twix or either a Kit Kat or a Reese's Cup. I know that's three, but they're all such good Halloween candies. How can you just limit it to one, right? But once again, have a happy and safe Halloween. Take care. God bless y'all. And until next time,